The late afternoon sun beat down on the quiet highway-side cafe, casting long shadows across the asphalt. A few patrons sipped coffee, enjoying the rare calm in the usually bustling area. Among them sat Steven Seagal, leaning back in his chair, sunglasses hiding his eyes, quietly observing the small crowd. He looked like just another man taking a break from a long ride, unassuming and relaxed. But on the horizon, a roar of engines shattered the calm. A group of bikers, at least a dozen of them, thundered into the parking lot, leather jackets creaking, chains rattling, and helmets glinting in the sunlight. Their laughter and shouts filled the air, a chaotic storm disrupting the serenity of the cafe. It was immediately clear that these bikers were trouble, looking for someone to pick on, or, more accurately, someone to underestimate. They spotted Steven instantly. "Hey, old man! You lost or something?" One of the bikers sneered, revving his bike for effect. Others laughed, circling him, swaggering with false confidence. They assumed this was an easy target, just some old guy sitting alone, completely unaware of the storm about to hit him. Steven didn't flinch. His movements were slow, deliberate, almost casual. He didn't reply. He didn't raise his voice. But the quiet in his posture, the way his hands rested lightly on the chair arms, hinted at something the bikers didn't know. There was power in stillness, and there was danger in the calm. The bikers, mistaking patience for weakness, started leaning closer, shoving chairs and bumping into Steven as if testing him. The crowd around the cafe began to notice. Phones emerged, cameras poised, some patrons holding their breath, sensing that the tension was thick enough to slice through. The lead biker smirked, leaning down. "What's the matter, Grandpa? Can't handle a little fun?" Little did they know, they had picked the wrong target. They had no idea that the man before them wasn't just a Hollywood action star but a master of martial arts, someone whose skill and precision could turn a single moment into instant regret. And in that quiet, almost imperceptible shift in Steven's eyes, the bikers unknowingly sealed their fate. What they thought would be a laugh, a show of dominance, they were about to realize how deadly misjudgments could be. They thought he was just another old guy. They were dead wrong. The bikers revved their engines again, the sound echoing like thunder across the empty highway. The leather-clad group swaggered closer to the outdoor seating where Steven Seagal sat. Their laughter, brash and mocking, filled the air as they circled him, thinking they had an easy target in front of them. One biker spat on the ground near Steven's chair, grinning with a mix of arrogance and overconfidence. "You're just some old guy," the leader sneered. "What are you gonna do? Sit there and stare at us?" The others laughed, pounding the metal of their bikes, creating a rhythmic, intimidating beat. But Steven didn't move. He didn't flinch. He didn't react in the way they expected. His sunglasses reflected the late afternoon sun, hiding his eyes, but his posture spoke volumes. There was a quiet confidence, a controlled stillness, an aura of someone who had seen and handled far worse than a group of reckless bikers. The bikers misinterpreted his calm for fear. They edged closer, leaning into his space, bumping him slightly with elbows and boots. They whispered challenges and mock threats, expecting him to snap, expecting an outburst that would give them the satisfaction of dominance. But Steven Seagal was no ordinary man. Every muscle in his body was poised, every movement deliberate. The air around him seemed heavier, charged with anticipation. A single wrong move from any of the bikers could trigger a reaction none of them had anticipated. The leader of the group smirked, circling Steven like a predator. "You're lucky we're just messing around. We could teach you a lesson," he jeered. Another biker laughed, slapping Steven lightly on the shoulder. "Yeah, come on, old man, show us what you got." The crowd of bystanders had grown silent, sensing the tension rising to an almost tangible level. Some reached for their phones, ready to record what they assumed would be a confrontation, perhaps even a fight. Others shifted back, unsure whether to intervene or stay out of the brewing storm. Steven's lips curved into a subtle, almost imperceptible smirk, but he didn't speak. He simply observed, the way a predator watches, waiting for the exact moment to strike. His calm demeanor only fueled the bikers' arrogance, making them bolder, unaware that their assumption of weakness was exactly what Steven wanted. One biker, eager to provoke a reaction, shoved Steven's chair slightly. "Come on, old man. Stand up if you dare." At that moment, the crowd collectively held its breath. They didn't yet know the history, the skill, or the mastery of the man in front of them. But they could sense the shift in energy, the weight of anticipation. Something was about to happen, something that would leave the bikers instantly regretting every careless word and movement. And then, before anyone could react, Steven's hand lifted slowly, not in aggression, not in fear, but in a precise gesture that signaled control. His eyes, hidden behind dark lenses, scanned each biker individually. Every subtle movement of his body spoke of decades of martial arts mastery, of battles fought and won, of discipline and focus honed to perfection. The lead biker, still laughing, failed to notice the shift. "You're just," he began, but stopped abruptly. The slightest flick of Steven's wrist, a minor shift in stance, caused an involuntary hesitation among the group. The once loud, confident bikers now felt a flicker of doubt. For the viewers at home, it was the perfect cliffhanger. The tension, the arrogance, the misjudgment, the moment before the storm hit, was electric. Everyone watching knew something monumental was about to unfold. If you were there, and a group of bikers started pushing someone like this, what would you do? Would you step in, watch silently, or act like Steven? Comment below, and tell us, which city or country are you watching this from? Back at the cafe, the bikers continued to circle, still unaware of the danger. They thought they were playing a game, but Steven Seagal wasn't just a man sitting at a table. He was a living weapon, every ounce of his presence a warning to the foolish. The air was thick with tension, the kind that makes seconds feel like hours, and the bikers were moments away from discovering the grave mistake they had made by messing with the wrong man. Even as Steven remained still, the shift in the atmosphere was undeniable. The crowd sensed it, the calm before the storm, the silent promise that anyone underestimating him was about to face instant regret. And for the bikers, the first sign of trouble was closer than they imagined, a single miscalculation away from turning their mockery into panic. The stage was set. All that remained was the moment Steven decided to act, and the bikers had no idea what was coming next. The bikers were still circling Steven Seagal, confident in their perceived superiority. Leather jackets creaked with each movement, helmets glinted under the late afternoon sun, and the sound of engines idling filled the tense air. They had convinced themselves that this was just a harmless game, intimidate the old man, make a fool of him, and leave the cafe with their egos inflated. But that arrogance would soon cost them dearly. One biker, the leader of the group, decided to push things a step further. He leaned in closer to Steven, shoving the back of his chair with a forceful elbow. "You think you're tough, huh? Stand up and prove it," he shouted, laughing as the others joined in, egging him on. Steven remained calm, his body unmoving yet alert. Every eye movement, every subtle shift in posture, betrayed decades of discipline. He wasn't reacting out of fear, nor was he preparing to lash out recklessly. Instead, he was calculating, waiting for the perfect moment to respond. The bikers, misreading the quiet confidence as weakness, grew bolder. One of them stepped even closer, swinging an arm in what he thought was a playful threat. "Hey, old man, you're in our world now." It was then that a change occurred, almost imperceptible at first. Steven adjusted his stance ever so slightly, grounding himself with a subtle yet commanding presence. His shoulders squared, his hands moved just enough to shift weight, a tiny motion, invisible to the untrained eye, but immediately noticeable to anyone familiar with martial arts. The bikers didn't notice. They were still laughing, still mocking, still convinced that they held all the power. But they had made the first mistake. Steven's eyes flicked over each biker, scanning, measuring, assessing. He didn't need to shout. He didn't need to act aggressively. The silence itself carried authority. The smallest change in his posture radiated a silent warning: underestimate him at your own risk. The leader, unaware of what he was provoking, made a more audacious move. He leaned forward, smirking, ready to shove Steven again. It was then that Steven's first subtle defensive maneuver occurred: a shift in weight, a slight pivot of the torso, enough to make the approaching biker stumble slightly forward. Nothing violent, nothing showy, yet the slightest imbalance in the biker's footing sparked a flicker of doubt among the others. The crowd of onlookers felt it immediately. Something was different. Something was off. The air that had been thick with tension and arrogance now felt charged with anticipation. The bikers, unaware of the power they were provoking, had unknowingly stepped into dangerous territory. Steven's calm, controlled presence created an invisible barrier. Every mocking word, every shove, every laugh the bikers threw at him now carried a risk they didn't understand. The miscalculation was complete. They assumed this was just a frail old man, incapable of defending himself. They had no idea they were dealing with a martial arts master, someone whose control and precision could turn even the slightest provocation into instant regret. The lead biker leaned closer again, trying to reassert dominance. "Come on, old man, enough staring. You're in our zone now," he barked, voice tinged with arrogance. And that's when Steven made a move, subtle, controlled, and perfectly timed. A flick of his wrist, a pivot of his hips, a minor adjustment in stance that caused the biker's momentum to shift slightly off balance. The action was so smooth that to the untrained eye, it seemed accidental, but for anyone who knew martial arts, it was a warning, a demonstration of control and readiness. The bikers, still confident, laughed it off, unaware that they had just been shown the first sign that they had underestimated their target. The air of mockery began to falter, replaced by a creeping sense of unease. The crowd, sensing the change, leaned in closer, some recording, some holding their breath. They knew something monumental was about to happen. The first mistake had been made. The bikers didn't see it yet, but the next move would change everything. If you were standing there, watching this group push someone like Steven, what would you do? Step in, walk away, or stay frozen in shock? Comment below with your answer. Meanwhile, the bikers continued circling, oblivious to the shift in energy. Every mocking gesture, every arrogant laugh was now a step closer to their own instant regret. They didn't know it yet, but the calm, quiet man they thought they could intimidate was about to show them exactly why appearances can be deceiving. And in that quiet, controlled moment before the storm, Steven Seagal's mastery, patience, and precision silently told the story. Underestimate him, and you'll regret it instantly. The tension in the air was palpable. The bikers, still circling Steven Seagal, had grown increasingly bold, convinced that his calm demeanor was a sign of weakness. They laughed, elbowed each other, and mocked him openly, oblivious to the storm brewing behind those quiet eyes. For them, this was entertainment, a game of intimidation. Steven remained perfectly still, his gaze scanning each member of the group. The sunlight glinted off his sunglasses, hiding the intensity of his focus. He didn't flinch. He didn't retaliate. Yet every movement he made, every shift in posture, carried the precision and control of a man trained in the highest levels of martial arts. The leader of the bikers leaned in closer, voice dripping with arrogance. "You're just another old guy, man. Don't pretend you can handle us." The group laughed, stepping even closer. One biker, eager to demonstrate dominance, shoved Steven lightly with his shoulder. A ripple of nervous energy ran through the crowd, as bystanders instinctively stepped back, unsure if they should intervene or just watch the drama unfold. And then, the reveal happened. Steven spoke, his voice calm yet commanding, cutting through the noisy chaos. "You should know. I've trained in karate for decades," he said, each word deliberate, measured. "And every move I make is calculated." The laughter stopped instantly. The bikers froze, unsure whether he was bluffing. A few glanced at each other nervously, the bravado fading as the words sank in. For the first time, they realized that this was no ordinary man. This was someone whose life had been dedicated to mastering combat, someone who could turn the slightest misstep against them in an instant. One biker scoffed, trying to hide his sudden unease. "Yeah, right. Like that matters now," he muttered, but his voice lacked the confidence it had moments ago. Steven's eyes, still hidden behind dark lenses, scanned them all again. He didn't need to demonstrate skill yet. His presence alone communicated authority. The subtle tension in his posture, the controlled shift of his weight, the poised hands ready to react, it all spoke volumes. The crowd watching was on the edge of their seats. Phones were raised, recording every detail, capturing the moment when intimidation met discipline. Bystanders whispered among themselves, some in awe, some holding their breath. Everyone could sense that this confrontation was about to escalate dramatically. The leader biker, now slightly unsettled, tried to reassert dominance. "We don't care about your karate. Step aside, or we'll handle it ourselves." A flicker of a smirk appeared on Steven's face, subtle and almost imperceptible, but enough to make the bikers uneasy. He remained calm, letting the threat hang in the air without immediate action. His silence spoke louder than any words could. Any sudden move, and the outcome would not favor them. This was the moment the bikers should have realized the first mistake. Underestimating Steven Seagal was their gravest error. His years of training, discipline, and experience were now fully in play, even if he hadn't yet struck. One biker, not understanding the weight of what he was provoking, moved toward Steven aggressively, attempting to demonstrate bravery. Instantly, Steven shifted subtly, his stance perfectly aligned, his hands prepared. The biker stumbled slightly, off balance, a clear signal that Steven's expertise could turn even the smallest push into disaster. The crowd collectively gasped, sensing the invisible shift. What they thought would be a simple confrontation had transformed into something far more dangerous. The bikers' laughter faded, their confidence wavered. The realization settled in, this man was far more than he appeared to be. Even as they tried to mask their fear, the energy in the air had changed completely. The bikers had unknowingly stepped into territory they weren't prepared for, and every second that passed made them more aware that this encounter could end in instant regret. Steven's voice broke the tension once more, soft but firm. "I suggest you reconsider your actions. Underestimating someone only leads to mistakes you'll regret." The bikers exchanged nervous glances. The bravado had left their eyes. They had laughed, mocked, and shoved, but now the weight of Steven's skill, discipline, and calm authority pressed down on them like an invisible force. The crowd held its collective breath, sensing the tipping point. Every spectator instinctively knew that the calm before the storm was over. Steven Seagal had revealed his background, and the bikers were seconds away from learning firsthand why misjudging him had been a catastrophic error. The stage was set for the next move, the moment when skill would speak louder than aggression, and when the bikers would face the consequences of their arrogance. The air was thick with tension. The bikers, who had moments ago laughed and jeered at Steven Seagal, were now hesitant. Their confidence had begun to crack, replaced by a creeping sense of unease. Steven remained calm, his body perfectly balanced, every muscle coiled yet relaxed, ready for the slightest provocation. The leader of the group, still trying to maintain a facade of bravado, stepped closer. "All right, old man," he sneered. "Show us what you got." His voice carried defiance, but his hands trembled slightly. The others mirrored him, stepping forward, circling with a predatory rhythm that was meant to intimidate but now only exposed their uncertainty. Steven tilted his head slightly, assessing, measuring every movement. In that brief instant, the bikers made their next mistake. One of them lunged forward, attempting a reckless shove. It was minor, uncoordinated, but in that moment it was enough. Steven moved. Not with anger. Not with force. Not with theatrics. but with absolute precision. A flick of his wrist, a subtle pivot, a controlled shift in weight, and the biker's momentum was used against him. He stumbled forward, off balance, his confidence crumbling in a fraction of a second. The crowd gasped. Phones recorded every movement, capturing the moment that the arrogant had underestimated the skilled. Steven didn't shout. He didn't attack aggressively. He moved only as much as necessary to neutralize the threat. Another biker, seeing his companion falter, tried to overcompensate. He swung his arm at Steven, thinking brute strength could win where intelligence and skill had not. Steven sidestepped effortlessly, his movements smooth, precise, almost effortless. The biker's momentum carried him forward, unbalancing him entirely. He staggered, reaching out for support that wasn't there, and crashed lightly into his friend. A ripple of panic spread through the group. They had thought they were intimidating an old man. They had thought strength and aggression could bend him to their will. But strength alone had no answer for mastery, for decades of disciplined training, for a mind that anticipated every possible reaction. Steven's calm presence radiated authority. Every move was calculated, a lesson in control and efficiency. Each biker who attempted a foolish attack was met with just enough redirection, balance, and timing to neutralize them without unnecessary violence. It was a demonstration of skill that left them shocked and humiliated. The leader tried again, desperate to regain dominance. He charged, fists raised. But Steven anticipated it before it fully began. A gentle push, a subtle pivot, and the leader was sent stumbling into the parking lot, landing on his side. No real harm, yet the lesson was clear. Arrogance and recklessness against expertise lead to instant regret. The other bikers froze, wide-eyed. Some whispered to each other, realizing they had misjudged the man before them. Their earlier laughter had vanished, replaced by fear and astonishment. Every movement Steven made was a statement. Skill, not muscle, dictated the outcome. Even as the bikers reeled, Steven's voice remained calm, quiet, and commanding. Underestimating someone without knowing their skill is dangerous. You've learned that the hard way. There was no threat in his tone, only clarity and authority. The bystanders, some still recording, some holding their breath, now understood the spectacle they were witnessing. This was more than a confrontation. It was a demonstration of mastery, discipline, and the danger of underestimating someone based purely on appearance. The bikers, humiliated yet unharmed, began retreating slowly, their arrogance replaced by respect and fear. The leader glanced at Steven one last time, a mixture of regret and disbelief on his face. Every second of mockery had been inverted into a lesson they would never forget. And all the while, Steven remained calm, composed, and in control. No shouting, no violence, no ego. Just pure skill, effortlessly applied, leaving the bikers, and the crowd, speechless. The scene was electric, a perfect combination of suspense, surprise, and admiration. The lesson was clear. Muscle alone cannot overcome skill, precision, and experience. And for the bikers, that lesson had arrived in the most immediate, unforgettable way. The bikers stumbled back, their bravado shattered by a few moments of precise, controlled movements. What had started as a display of dominance and arrogance had quickly transformed into an unexpected lesson in humility. The leader, once confident and mocking, now glared at Steven Seagal with a mixture of disbelief and regret. He had underestimated the man sitting calmly at a table, and that error was glaringly obvious. Around them, the crowd erupted, not with laughter, but with astonishment. Phones clicked, videos recorded every subtle movement, every controlled step that had brought these aggressive bikers to a sudden halt. Spectators whispered to each other, unable to process what they had just witnessed. The quiet old man they assumed to be harmless had just demonstrated the precision and mastery that comes from decades of martial arts training. The bikers, their egos bruised, took hesitant steps backward. Some tried to mask their embarrassment with forced laughter, but the unease in their movements betrayed the truth. they had been outclassed. One biker muttered under his breath, He's not messing around," his eyes darting nervously to the floor. Steven remained composed. Not a muscle in his face betrayed triumph, not a word escaped that could be interpreted as gloating. He simply watched as the bikers realized the depth of their mistake. Calmness and restraint had won the day, but the lesson was undeniable. Arrogance and ignorance can be met with immediate, unyielding consequences. The leader finally spoke, his voice tight. "Okay, we get it," he said, though it lacked conviction. The words were more of an admission of defeat than a threat. His friends muttered agreements, nodding reluctantly, the earlier laughter now replaced by apprehension. Spectators, meanwhile, were buzzing. "Did you see that?" one whispered to another. "He didn't even raise his voice, and yet they're completely shaken." Phones recorded every movement, ready to share the story online, where Steven's quiet but decisive skill would soon go viral. As the bikers retreated further, the reality of the situation sank in. They had made a simple error. They had judged a man by his appearance, assuming that age and calmness equaled weakness. But the quiet confidence, the subtle movements, the precision, everything about Steven radiated skill. They had not been ready for what they faced. The crowd slowly exhaled, a mix of relief and awe washing over them. Bystanders whispered and exchanged glances, realizing they had witnessed something extraordinary. Steven had handled the situation with such composure and authority that the bikers had no choice but to retreat, intact, but humiliated. Even as the tension eased, the lesson lingered. Each biker now understood, viscerally, the cost of misjudging someone based on assumptions. The leader's hands trembled slightly as he steadied himself, scanning the crowd nervously, a mix of embarrassment and awe etched across his face. Steven finally leaned back, folding his hands calmly on the table. He gave no speech, no further demonstration, only a silent reminder that control and skill outweigh recklessness every single time. It was not just a lesson for the bikers, but for everyone watching. Have you ever seen someone instantly teach a lesson without even shouting or fighting aggressively? Share your story in the comments below. And don't forget, where are you watching this from? Which city or country? As the bikers mounted their bikes to leave, the crowd couldn't help but admire the discipline, the precision, and the restraint displayed. Social media feeds would soon be flooded with videos and reactions. The story would go viral within hours, but for those present, the memory of Steven's calm, commanding presence and the bikers' instant regret would remain unforgettable. This was not about strength or violence. It was about mastery, timing, and the silent authority of someone who had spent decades perfecting his craft. And for the bikers, the lesson would linger far longer than the embarrassment itself. Never underestimate someone, and never let arrogance cloud judgment. By the time the bikers rode away, their pride deflated and their confidence shaken, the reality was undeniable. Steven Seagal had turned an attempted intimidation into a showcase of skill, discipline, and absolute control. The crowd erupted into whispers and quiet applause, a mix of relief and awe, and even a few murmurs of admiration for the man who had faced potential danger without ever raising his voice. For the spectators, it was a moment they would tell friends and strangers about for years. For the bikers, it was a lesson they would not soon forget. And for Steven Seagal, it was just another demonstration of why true skill does not require ego. It requires precision, patience, and the wisdom to know when and how to act. By the time the bikers had finally ridden away, the crowd was buzzing with disbelief. What had started as a tense confrontation had transformed into a lesson in mastery, patience, and absolute control. Spectators whispered to one another, phones still recording, capturing every subtle movement that had rendered the arrogant bikers silent and humbled. Within minutes, videos began appearing online. Clips of the incident were shared across social media platforms, spreading like wildfire. Viewers were captivated, not by the violence, but by the precision and calm displayed by Steven Seagal. Unlike the chaos that often dominates viral content, this story had a unique allure. An older, composed man facing a group of aggressive bikers and handling the situation with a perfect combination of skill and restraint. Comments flooded in, viewers from all over the world reacting to the clip. "Wow, he didn't even have to shout," wrote one user. "That subtle shift in stance just told the whole story," typed another. Discussions erupted about discipline, skill, and the danger of underestimating someone based solely on appearance. The story became a global lesson in humility and the power of quiet authority. Meanwhile, the bikers' videos of the incident, initially intended to boast their dominance, also went viral. But instead of admiration, they received ridicule and shock. Friends and family who saw the clips expressed disbelief. "You really messed with the wrong person," one comment read. The biker's mistake was broadcast worldwide, a cautionary tale for anyone who thought arrogance could overpower expertise. Steven Seagal's calm, composed demeanor became the focal point. People admired not just his skill, but his patience and intelligence. He had demonstrated that real power doesn't require loud threats or brute force. It comes from discipline, knowledge, and the ability to control a situation without unnecessary aggression. The incident sparked conversations about martial arts, self-discipline, and respect. Fans of action films and martial arts experts analyzed the movements, praising Steven's technique and decision-making. Educators and motivational speakers even used the clip as an example. Control and skill often speak louder than aggression and intimidation. And while the world watched, Steven remained in the background, unbothered by fame or attention. He didn't seek recognition. He didn't gloat. Every movement, every decision in that encounter had been deliberate, measured, and controlled. The viral moment was secondary. The real triumph was the demonstration of mastery and the lessons it imparted. The crowd at the cafe, now dispersing, still talked animatedly about the event. Some spectators replayed the footage on their phones, pointing out small details, the subtle weight shifts, the way he anticipated each movement, the calm authority that left the bikers stunned. They knew they had witnessed something rare, a true master handling a tense situation flawlessly. And for the audience watching online, the lesson was even clearer. The story resonated far beyond the parking lot. It reminded people that appearances can be deceiving, that arrogance can be dangerous, and that skill combined with patience and intelligence is unmatched. If you believe that true strength comes from skill, discipline, and intelligence rather than aggression, smash that like button. Type respect in the comments to honor mastery over arrogance, and don't forget to subscribe for more jaw-dropping real-life moments like this. The story didn't just end with a viral video, it sparked reflection. It reminded viewers worldwide that judging someone without understanding their experience or skill can lead to instant regret. The bikers had learned that lesson the hard way, and everyone watching learned it vicariously, safely from their screens. And so, the parking lot encounter became a legend, not because of violence, not because of loud confrontation, but because one man's mastery, calmness, and precision turned arrogance into humility in an instant. Steven Seagal had shown the world that when skill speaks, it speaks loudly, and sometimes, silence says more than words ever could.